would rather do a therapeutic phlebotomy all by myself using one hand than injecting intravenously anything that's not pharmaceutical grade. Vigorous Steve here. Let's discuss intravenous administrations, which is the administration route you should never be doing because that's what junkies do, or so you've heard. Well, in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. Intravenous administrations are very commonly used in medical settings, one of them being to restore hydration levels when a normal saline solution or isotonic solution is administered intravenously. One of the reasons why intravenous administrations are preferred are for the large injection volume which are required for particular treatments. Again, to restore hydration, you might need to administer 250 milliliters, 500 milliliters, or maybe even a liter of fluid intravenously. We'll discuss all of that in this video. Before we get into it, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider joining the Vigorous crew by subscribing, and please hit the notification bell button so you can get notified whenever a new video drops. Now, I think a lot of people are adverse to the idea of an intravenous administration because the media demonized this administration route. Because again, like I said in the beginning of this video, people addicted to recreational drugs like heroin, for example, and they do multiple injections per day. They use dull needles, resulting in track marks, or they share needles, resulting in HIV transmission, highlighting all the worst parts of intravenous administrations and none of the potential benefits. Again, if you talk with a doctor, a certified nurse, they will have a lot to say about intravenous administrations because, again, the compound selection which are used in medical settings differ greatly from the recreational drugs which are used by people suffering from drug addiction. In which case, cerebrolysin in a multitude of milliliters might actually be beneficial to help with withdrawal from recreational drug addiction. Again, both are going through the same administration routes, being intravenous administration, but one of them might be able to help resolve a drug addiction. So again, we can't fault this administration route. It should be left to the professionals. That's why we have nurses to administer particular compounds. It isn't really an administration you can do at home by yourself using one hand. And even if you have a very steady hand and you have a lot of experience doing subcutaneous or intramuscular injections, I would still advise everybody to leave intravenous administrations to the professionals. Myself, for an example, I have a private nurse who comes to my house who does all of my IV administrations once per week, so I don't have to get my hands dirty with this administration route, again, because I don't have the formal medical training to do this properly. Now, luckily for me, my nurse is very experienced, so I don't have any track marks or bruising that is left behind from an IV administration of injectable glutathione or injectable vitamin C or NAD+, which have a huge body of medical literature behind them that they're preferred over oral N-acetylcysteine, which ultimately helps in the production of glutathione, albeit not to the extent that injectable glutathione can raise glutathione stores within the body, or oral vitamin C, which has a lower antioxidant profile compared to injectable vitamin C, especially if from an acute sense, or oral nicotinamide mononucleotides, which helps to generate nicotinamide adenine dinucleotides, which again helps with mitochondrial functioning and the production of ATP. So you can take these three orally and raise your antioxidant profile to a certain extent, albeit that two of these compounds need to be converted before they're biologically active, or you could choose to go with an IV administration and get the maximum bioavailability and all of the benefits, but you would need to dilute these compounds severely because in very high concentrations they might have a pro-oxidant effect or make you feel weird. NAD+, for example, or injectable curcumin will make you feel a little bit off, and it's a very difficult feeling to describe. I would say I feel on edge whenever NAD+ is administered too fast. So I had a long discussion with my private nurse and told them, said, listen, please dilute the NAD+ in at least 500 milliliters of normal saline solution and let me absorb it over the course of an hour or 1.5 hours. And again, guys, I can't emphasize this enough. Whenever you do an intravenous administration using an experienced medical professional, make sure to instruct them to only use a retractable catheter needle, not a butterfly needle. The benefit of a retractable catheter is that once the IV administration is done, the needle is retracted and a plastic tube remains behind within the vein, allowing for intravenous administrations for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, however long you need to completely absorb the normal saline solution and the injectable glutathione or the NAD+, or whatever else you're doing during that treatment. This allows you to move around. So if you're doing this at home and you're going to work, or you're bringing your laptop to the IV clinic, this allows you to work a little bit. Again, if you're doing this around this area, whether that's in the hands or in the elbows, once the catheter is in place, because it's made out of plastic, this allows for some movement. Whereas with a butterfly needle, because it's made out of metal, I mean, it's a needle after all, once you move around even in the slightest sense, this will cut your veins up from the inside out. So this is very undesirable when you're undergoing an IV treatment that takes an hour or longer and you have to perform some work. Now you only have one hand left. So take it from me, I would avoid those butterfly needles all entirely. Again, they leave some bruising because the slightest movement will scrape the inside of the arteries, resulting in bleeding and bruising later on. And it's this bruising and these blood outbursts in particular parts of your arm that makes you look like a heroin addict. And this is why IV administrations often get a bad rep. So if you have a professional that knows how to do this properly, again, don't do this by yourself, then it's a totally normal and very beneficial administration route for anti-aging purposes or other medical treatments where intravenous administrations are preferred. Now, in my many weeks of research, I've seen injectable taurine, I've seen injectable curcumin, EDTA, glutathione, NAD+, obviously, which is what I'm using right now, vitamin C. I've seen multivitamin cocktails in the form of a Myers cocktail. I've used 20 bottles of the Myers cocktail myself with no real noticeable benefit. So from my personal experience, the Myers cocktail is something you can avoid if you've been in a chronic micronutrient sufficient state like I've been for the last couple of years. So injectable vitamins at the dosages that Mayer cocktails contain, from my personal experience, there's no benefit, but several grams of vitamin C with injectable administration routes, that's very beneficial, especially in combination with injectable glutathione. Now, we'll make dedicated videos for the injectable glutathione, vitamin C, NAD+, and perhaps a couple other injectable compounds in the future when I'm done trialing these compounds, so please stay tuned for those. And with that out of the way, I also want to touch on intravenous growth hormone use. The reason why I talked about intravenous growth hormone use is primarily in the context of testing serum growth hormone concentrations and serum IGF-1 concentrations with pharmaceutical-grade growth hormone products. Generally speaking, what you see on the forums is that people would administer 10 IUs of growth hormone intramuscularly 2.5 hours before doing their serum growth hormone and serum IGF-1 test. Now, for serum IGF-1, most people would administer 10 IUs growth hormone before bed the night before because it takes a little bit longer for serum IGF-1 levels to reach peak concentrations for that dose of growth hormone. So they might do 10 IUs the night before the test and then 10 IUs intramuscular 2 hours or 2.5 hours before the test, resulting in a serum growth hormone concentration of about 28 to 32 nanograms per milliliter. Now, I always felt that that timing was a little bit cumbersome because sometimes, even with pharmaceutical growth hormone preparations, it might be 26 or sometimes might even be higher, in which case you usually get lucky, right, with the timing. So sometimes they would use a pharmaceutical grade growth hormone and the timing was off, resulting in 20 nanograms per milliliter, for example, and then they think the growth hormone product is underdosed or counterfeit or whatever reason, right, destroyed during shipment. If you do 2 IUs growth hormone intravenously, a mere 5 minutes before drawing blood for analysis, growth hormone concentrations will be somewhere between 80 to 120 nanograms per milliliter. Again, this is in the context of testing the purity of a pharmaceutical grade growth hormone, not for the sake of building muscle tissue. Although, for anybody that's coached a decent amount of high-level amateur competitors coming from the Arab countries or India, that they know that IV growth hormone is used readily in these countries. So whereas in the Western world, people are kind of adverse to this idea, again, because of the stigma that IV administrations is only done by heroin addicts or other addicts using recreational drugs through the IV administration route. In some countries of the world, on the amateur circuit, it's actually done quite readily. Now, some people swear by this. Some people run this experiment and say that it's very unproductive or not worth all these IV administrations that are a little bit more painful than intramuscular administrations. Right? They don't notice a benefit. But some people, right, people that I've talked to over the last 10 years of coaching, swear by it. Now, this is not something I would generally recommend for people to do. Again, the benefits that I've seen coaching these kinds of clients, I would say that the benefits are there, but right, unless you're competing at the highest level of the amateur circuit, it's probably not going to be worth it because you'll have to do these IV administrations multiple times per day by yourself. And in my opinion, it's still better to leave this to the professionals, right? The certified medical professionals who do this for a living, right? It's their job. Still, there are people out there who do this, but I can't say that the medical evidence is there to really support IV growth hormone administrations for a prolonged period of time. And before we close off this video, I want to make it perfectly clear to you guys and emphasize highly that whenever you do an intravenous administration using an experienced medical professional, only administer pharmaceuticals, not an underground lab, not something you brewed by yourself at home. Only pharmaceuticals who are FDA approved in the country of origin, the country of production. They might be shipped all over the world and not be FDA approved in the country that you're administering. Again, there's a huge black market, but stick to pharmaceuticals only, please. For the love of whatever religion you believe in, whether that's Carl Sagan, God, Buddha, whatever, for the love of that, only stick to pharmaceuticals because this is the most advanced administration route. If you administer in an underground lab, if it's water-based and there's a little bit of bacteria in there, you go septic immediately. Also keep in mind that underground labs are not always accurately dosed. With pharmaceuticals, you get exactly what you pay for. You pay a surplus, so you know that whatever this compound contains is the active pharmaceutical ingredient as it's mentioned on the label, at the dosage as mentioned on the label. With underground labs or through home brewing, whatever else that you find shady, you're not exactly sure if it's pharmaceutical grade and FDA approved, you're not sure what you're injecting. So why run the risk, right? I'll leave it at that. Sorry to be a little bit of a dad in this context, but again, it's an advanced administration route, just a piece of friendly advice. Now, if you ask me, if I ever have to choose between a do-it-yourself therapeutic phlebotomy at home or injecting an underground lab intravenously, I would rather do a therapeutic phlebotomy all by myself using one hand than injecting intravenously anything that's not pharmaceutical grade. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find anything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VigorSteve. A front double bicep for the Vigorous crew. You guys know what to do. Much love, much appreciated. Thank you guys so much for fueling the algorithm on all of the latest YouTube videos. Now that I'm staying awake while these YouTube videos are live and have a chance and opportunity to reply to all of your comments, I feel that the algorithm is on fire. So even though I'm not sleeping according to my circadian rhythm, I'm replying to you guys. You guys are fueling the algorithm and everything is leveling up together. Much love, much appreciation. I'll see you guys in the next video dropping tomorrow.